Welcome to the Plant Medicine Summit, where you'll discover essential practices for revitalizing your health through medicinal herbs, flowers, and essential oils from leading experts in ecology and health. Please share this event with your friends and family, and come join us on Facebook at the ShiftNetwork. And now your host, David Crow, founder of Floracopia.
Welcome to another segment of the 5th Annual Plant Medicine Summit, where we are exploring the many diverse uses of using medicinal plants for treating modern epidemics. I'm your host, David Crow, and in our segment today, we're going to be talking about Mayan spiritual bathing, and our guest is Dr. Gabrielle Francis. Dr. Francis is a naturopathic doctor, a chiropractor, an acupuncturist, and the author of The Rockstar Remedy, a rock and roll doctor's prescription for living a long, healthy life. For practice, the urban alchemist in New York City draws from the ancient wisdom of natural medicine to balance our modern day health challenges and indulgences. So, Dr. Francis, welcome.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Shift. I'm so honored to be with you guys today. This is going to be fun.
Well, it looks like you are all set up to tell us about floral bathing and herbal bathing in the Mayan tradition. And before we get started, I'd just like to set a little context here because you have an impressive medical background. You are not just one doctor, but three. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about how it is that as a medical doctor in all three fields of medicine that you practice, that you are sitting here with a big bowl of flowers in front of you, about to tell us about this ancient tradition of healing and what it has to do with modern epidemics.
Well, I had a long career of working in the music industry, and for about 15 years I toured with rock bands as their doctor on tour, and I was fully mobile. And during that time, I used to just go on tour, and when I wasn't on tour, I would go into different countries and study with the medicine people and the healers in those countries. So I was doing a 6-month tour through the Ruta Maya, looking at all the pyramids. And, you know, whenever you're in healing, you find the healers and the healers find you. And so I came across many Mayan curanderas. And curandera is a healer, and curandero is the healer that's a man. And they taught me about the Mayan spiritual bath. I also learned the Mayan massage. So I became fully immersed in the culture of Mayan healing. And I really feel that, you know, this would be a very important thing because today I believe one of the modern epidemics is fear, grief and sadness, anger. We can see all three of those. And with the Mayan healing, they really believe that the fundamental cause of all illness starts with the emotional and spiritual. And so I thought that would be a great thing to bring into the context as a modern day epidemic.
Absolutely. So let's talk about some of those underlying philosophies. What is it that we're treating exactly? What is it that is making us sick? Where does it come from? And how does that bowl of flowers in front of you help us?
So if a person goes to a Mayan healer, this is something that's practiced really a lot among the women curanderas, but I've seen it with men as well. And by the way, this isn't only just a Mayan practice. I've seen it all over Central and South America. And I've also seen it in North Africa, Morocco, the Middle East, and in Asia, different variations of it. So I do believe that it has a universal quality to it. But if a person goes to a Mayan healer, they present with their symptoms, and the healer will assess them in the context of their entire culture, of their family, of their relationships, and they'll assess them by looking at them, doing some physical exam. They'll take the pulses, and they'll take a very, very long story. And the Mayan belief of healing is that everything starts with the emotional and spiritual. So they believe the main causes of spiritual illness are anger, coraje, tristeza, which is sadness, pesar, grief, susto, fright, Nvidia, which is envy, and mal ojo, which is the evil eye. So these are very different than the way we look at medicine, but they believe that in order to have any kind of physical healing, you have to clear the emotional and spiritual blockages, and that these can be things that are brought upon the person, that come from trauma, that come from relationship problems, and then in the case of envy and the evil eye, they actually believe that somebody wishing evil on you or looking at you wrong, or even being jealous of you can cause spiritual illness in you. And so they first would do the full diagnosis. And the Mayan spiritual bath can be a standalone treatment for that person, or it can be a preparation for deeper sessions or treatments that involve things like soul retrieval, the Mayan abdominal massage, and other types of healing. So the bath can be the only treatment, it can be a series of baths, or it can also be a preparation to get the body and the soul ready for the next phase of healing.
Nice. Now, how much of this are you doing in your practice? In other words, how many times have you prescribed these baths? And I'm particularly interested in how you're translating.
I haven't been doing this much in my practice because it involves a lot of splashing, but I do something very similar to it, which is called Olympia. And Olympia is part of Curanderismo as well. And Curanderismo is the broad term that refers to the healing of the Central American and South American people. And there's different types of curanderas and curanderos, and they can have specialties. So this is one of the practices of Curanderismo. And there is a way to do it in the practice where you take the water that you've made with the bath and you put it in a spray bottle, which is very unsatisfying because it's so much more fun to just splash it all over. But I have a beautiful roof in my house in New York, and sometimes I'll invite people over and practice it on them in the space there. But I decided to create this self-care ritual because I think it's so valuable that people could do a little mini self-care ritual on themselves. However, the way it's practiced in Central America is much more of a session that you go and you have the practitioner do it on you.
I see. Okay, that's helpful to understand. So what are you seeing in terms of translating some of these ideas? Because what you're talking about as far as the root causes of emotional and spiritual illness, those are universal human things.
Right.
And at the same time, there's quite a lot of difference between our cultures and how we present it. And so I imagine that you have some clients and patients who are very concerned about the evil eye, and probably others that think it's just superstition. So how are you bridging these two worlds culturally to actually help people understand what it is that's bothering them and how to get to the root of it?
Right. Well, you want to first take their history. And I think one thing that we're dealing with as a culture, everybody right now, is the susto, which is the fear of the pandemic, the fear of the unknown. That would be also post-traumatic stress, so trauma. And a lot of people have dealt with trauma. Grief, of course, that's kind of universal right now. Everybody's lost somebody, or they've lost the quality of their life. We might be feeling a collective grief for things happening around us and all the people that are suffering right now. Anger, as we can see with all these protests going on, there's this social justice anger that people have collectively. So those are pretty universal. And the sadness, they would call, that would be what we would call depression. So those are very universal. The envy and the evil eye, I can definitely see in people who come from Central America and who come from the Middle East and the Mediterranean. These are things that they definitely believe in, these superstitions, that they believe people have projected that kind of thing onto them. And so you can present the idea and see how it takes with somebody, but really it has to resonate with them as well in order for it to be something that I believe that what people believe about what's happening to them is just as important as what's happening to them. So if we want them to be able to accept this treatment for that cause, we have to have this mutual conversation and dance that makes sense to them.
Right. Nice. Well, just kind of a rhetorical political question here. Do you think that we should really be using these as patients to treat all of these very normal human reactions that we're having? Or shouldn't we be treating the people who are causing all the problems?
A little bit of both. How about that?
All right, good. Well, tell us, what do you have there on your plate? I'm curious as to what the herbs and the flowers are that you use in these treatments.
So there's no prescribed herb or flower that's used. Basically, the way it works is the patient or the person comes in with their issues, and the curandera, or if you're doing it on yourself, will listen, diagnose, and then they basically start to say prayers and set intentions. And then they go out on their discovery to find the herbs. So you can do this in your backyard, or the curandera would do it in the woods around them. And there's 3 main ways that indigenous people find the herb that they're curing. And it's not really something that's based on the active constituents in the plants or the medicinal qualities. They do, number 1, what we call the doctrine of signatures. So a plant will call to them because it looks like something that needs to be healed. So for example, I have a rose here, and the rose has these little petals that sometimes look like a heart. So the curandera may say this person has an ailment of grief and sadness, depression, so we need to bring in some things that kind of help to heal the heart. So the doctrine of signatures says that the way a plant looks, smells, the way it presents will tell us something about what it can treat. The second thing is they do something called dowsing. So they'll call prayers up to the universe for this patient, for this client, and then they have this dowsing stick that magnetically draws them towards the plant that they want to use, and they take that plant. And then another thing is they believe that whenever somebody has a spiritual ailment or even a physical ailment, that the universe will bring the proper plants for the healing. And so they'll ask the person, what plants have you noticed are growing in your yard right now or around your area? And they believe that those are the gifts of the universe. So this is more checked in through spiritual reasons. And there's really no method, but there is some things that are very classic. Like they love to use rosemary. Rosemary is known for clearing negative energy. And they usually are drawn towards plants with a very strong aromatic component, which means that they have essential oils. And what we know about essential oils is that they are the immune system of the plant, and they have a very potent activity to help the immune system and to clear bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungus. But they do also affect our olfactory senses, which can affect our mood as well. So what they would normally do is say the prayers in intention, and while they're going out to do the collection, they're praying, they're collecting whatever resonates and draws, and they bring them back here, and then they put it in the water from there.
Nice, beautiful description of all those stages. Now, how do you do it?
How do I do it?
Well, because, you've told me the traditional methods, and it involves a lot of steps that really you have to almost be in the native environment in order to do it. So, for example,
I did a little a little self-care for people to be able to do a bath for themselves, and mostly for the purpose of clearing negative energy in order to create space for new positive energies to come in.
Well, let me ask you a very specific thing. Like, for example, when you're getting the diagnosis, are you reading their pulses?
Yes.
Wonderful. Yeah. And are you using this doctrine of signatures approach to decide which flowers to use or which herbs to use?
Myself, when I'm doing it?
Yes.
Yes, and I just kind of, I would say I feel intuitively drawn towards something, and kind of, I really put the calculating brain aside and go mostly with just intuition, like what I'm being drawn to, what's beautifully pulling me. And also because the entire time that you're doing the collection, the most important part of it is that you're constantly reciting prayers.
I see. And what kind of prayers do you recite, if I may ask you a personal question?
Okay, so the Mayans use their mixture, the people who practice this are a mixture between Catholicism and the indigenous Mayan religion. And so they're praying to Jesus, Mary, and all of the saints. And they're also praying to the forces of nature. So you're offering prayers to the sun, the wind, the moon, the plants, the earth. And so the prayers are very all-consuming of their deities, which are a mixture between Catholic saints and the indigenous deities, as well as the elements of the earth, water, fire, plants, and the wind. And I do that as well because I was raised Catholic. I throw in some things like Buddha and Krishna too, because I like to make, it universal. But if I'm doing it with somebody of a certain religion, I'll ask them who they would like to invoke, who they would like me to invoke. But basically, anybody can practice this. You don't have to change your religion, and you don't have to have a religion. You just have to feel that there's something of a higher power that you would like to invite in to help with the healing as well as the elements.
Beautiful. And I think what's most profound about this, as far as my first impression listening to you, is that you are praying for and with your patients, correct?
Yes, and it's a very, very powerful. If you've ever had a treatment from one of these healers, to me, the most profound part of it is that somebody is putting all their energy into this prayer for you, and it's very emotional and overwhelming, and I do believe that that's the most important part of it. So the prayers start the minute they start the collection. The herbs, the entire time they're collecting, they're praying, and they're praying for the intentions as well. And the intentions always involve what we want to clear in order to create space for what we want to bring in.
Have you talked to other medical doctors about possibly incorporating that spiritual approach into their practices?
I think some doctors are, but it's just not very widespread. And I think that, in my practice, I always connect with people spiritually. I want to know what it is that makes them want to be a better person, or what they lean on when they're in times of crisis. And I think right now we're really dealing with a lack of spirituality in our culture. And part of it is because people are kind of losing religion. And with the loss of religion, and I understand why they're losing religion, because, the religions have become kind of corporate, and they've really lost their soul in a way. So I understand people losing their religion, but what we're losing with that is these rituals and practices that I believe help to ground spirituality into our everyday life. And so one of the things that I think is important about what these other cultures have to offer us, they have these beautiful rituals, which are ways that we can bring new energies, separate, and just kind of ground ourselves spiritually in the world and they add so much color and beauty to our lives as well.
Yes, indeed. Well, these are very wise words, very, very timely. So thank you. And I'm just curious about the practicality of this, because I'm trying to envision you in your clinic, and you are offering chiropractic treatments and acupuncture treatments and naturopathic diagnoses and prescriptions and all these kinds of things. How do you manage to fit all of this in? And at what point would you actually start to do this level of spiritual healing with people, or is it just something that you do with everybody?
This would be something special, but also, just getting people to start the conversation about spirituality. I usually do that on the first visit, and all it takes is listening, and listening with empathy. And when somebody feels listened to, you can see their whole body change. And most doctors don't have the time to listen to people. But when I get their story, and it starts with the physical, but the deeper you go next into the emotional, and then you go deeper into the spiritual. And so I believe there's a body, mind, spirit approach, and that our body is a metaphor for things happening emotionally and spiritually. So I always usually start people with a physical detox, like a cleanse, to clean out their body physically before I do the work of building, which is, for example, adrenal work or hormone balancing. I always detox people first. And so what I tell them is, the detox is the time for you to clear yourself emotionally and spiritually too. Your body is a metaphor for things happening emotionally and spiritually. So while you're doing the cleanse, the smoothie and eating clean, this is the time where we work on our relationships. We let go of patterns that are no longer serving us. We clean our house. We do an inventory of things that we want to let go of. We heal relationships. So that we're detoxing on all levels first. It's very alchemical. And then when we do the building work, I invite them to bring the new things emotionally and spiritually into their life. So the conversation flows very naturally. And to be honest, it makes sense with everybody. Even my corporate patients, they get that, actually. They get that.
Nice. All right. Thank you. Well, I can sense that the audience is getting restless with my intellectual questions about all of this. So why don't you tell us what you do? Show us what you do if you can. Give us a demonstration of this floral aromatic type of healing.
So the first thing that you do, and do you want me to show you what I would do on somebody else, or more of the self-care that they can do on themselves?
How about both?
Well, it's kind of the same, but I'll do them together. So the first thing is you set the intention, and you have to be very clear about what you want to let go of and what you want to bring in. So that's a very important thing, because that's going to kind of carry us through the entire ritual. And then the herbal collection comes next. Now, you can either go out in your yard. For me, it's my roof garden. You can go out to a park in nature to do this collection. Or if you don't have it, you can actually do this by getting the herbs and flowers from a flower shop in a grocery store. But the most important part of the collection is that the entire time you're collecting or buying or walking to the store to buy or walking around the park to get this, is that you're praying, number one, about your intention, and number two, giving gratitude to the sun, the earth, the wind, the moon, the plants, and the flowers. And so you're constantly repeating these prayers, and you can write out a specific prayer. And I usually will have a prayer that will include the deities that person focuses on in their specific spiritual practice, and invite them in, as well as my own special saints. So you go out, you collect with prayer, and what you do is you put them in a bowl of water, purified water, and the next thing you do is, while you're praying, and setting the intention, you massage and break up the flowers and the herbs in the water bath for at least 15 to 20 minutes, okay? Then what you do is let the water bathe in the bowl for several hours in the sun. So you give it a sun bath, and I actually give mine a sun and a moon bath, okay? Then you come back to the bath, and you're ready for the ritual. So the ritual involves first creating sacred space. So if you're doing this in your house, you just create a circle of space that is just going to be your private ritual area. If you're doing it outside, you do it in the grass or on my roof deck. And while you're creating the sacred space, you're honoring the elements and the directions, and you're giving thanks to all of the elements again, and you're also continuing to set the intention. The next thing you do is you take incense. Now, the Mayans would use copal. Copal is the holy incense of the Mayan region, and it comes from the copal tree. It's a resin. It's not so easy to find in America, so you could also use a smudge stick or another kind of incense. And what you do is while you're praying to the sun, the moon, the wind, the water, the earth, the plants, you bless the directions, and you go around your sacred space. And first you clear the space with the incense, and then you clear your body with the incense. And if I were doing this on somebody else, in the Mayan region, they actually have a big incense, I forget what they call it. It's a big bowl full of the incense, and they kind of are, going around the person's body with the incense, just clearing all the energy. So once you've done that with the incense and the prayers, you've cleared the circle and the body, now it's time for the bath, and that's the fun part. So what you do is they believe that we have this aura of energy, not just in our body, but that our chakras extend out. And so what you're doing with the bath is you're actually throwing the water high around the whole aura to clear off any energies that could be attached in your spiritual field. And so there's two ways you can do this at home. You can take a bath like this, and while you're doing it, you're saying your prayers, you're praying to the elements, and you're reciting your intentions, and you're throwing the water and the herbs all around you. Okay, and obviously I'm not going to do this in my house, but you would be doing this outside. The other way you can do it is you can make a bath that you put in your bathtub, and you throw that into the bathtub, you sit in the bathtub, and you throw the water around yourself. But it's very important that you clear your whole entire energy field at the same time you're praying, giving thanks, and setting your attention. Once you're done with the actual water and the bath, you close the space with the incense again, and more gratitude, more thanks to the elements, more setting of the intention. And then at that point, you finish the bath and you go down and you lay down in a quiet space or just sit. I prefer people to do it while they're staring at nature outside somewhere. You could also do this inside. And you lie with your arms open to receive the blessing and to let everything settle in.
Beautiful. Thank you. Now, can you tell us some case histories? What do you see, both in the short term and the long term? I imagine that you see many kinds of reactions that people have.
Well,
healing experiences,
self-care,
both when it's happening. But I'm also curious about what you might see in people that they're telling you something 6 months later.
Well, what a person, if someone's doing this on their own, it's very gentle, and there's usually no kind of really heavy kind of clearing, except that you generally feel lighter and more peaceful. So I don't want anybody to be afraid if they're doing this on themselves. When a healer is doing this to somebody else. That healer is bringing in a lineage of ancestors that are there with them to heal. They're also bringing in a very powerful energy that they've accumulated from years and years of healing. And it can release some really intense stuff in people. And, what I've seen in Central America was, some people just will start throwing up, and they'll have like a resurgence of PTSD coming out of their body. It's almost like you can see exorcisms happening in people, and it can last for a very long time, especially if it's in a container where the healer's land has some very potent stuff. In my practice, I have seen some people just have releases of trauma, a lot of PTSD, a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, and a lot of times they can't even place their emotion on it, but sometimes they can relate it to a specific trauma. And it can be really intense, and one of the reasons I don't do it in my office is if somebody has a release like that, it can take them hours to clear it and for me to work them through it. And so I prefer to do it when I don't have other patients waiting in the other room. And the healers will be doing this in land, and there will usually be assistants around. But I don't want people to be afraid, because this is something that when you do on yourself, it doesn't have that potency of a release.
Well, where does the healing come in? You're talking about stirring things up for people, and I know that a lot of people would have some concerns about stirring things up at this point. Things are pretty stirred up already. So where does the healing come in, and when do people get some peace and some relief and some release from all of this?
Sometimes you need a series of these for cleansing, number one, but a lot of times you're having a lot of stuff coming out. So people will, it could be a latent trauma that somebody didn't even think about for many, many years, like the grief that their mother passed, and they didn't realize that they were still carrying that grief with them, but it was affecting everything in their life still. And then after the bath, they have this deep purging and cleansing and sadness and trauma. And so you have to really be there with them, not to change it, but to be with them to allow it to come through, and to stay with them the entire time they're clearing it. And, what happens after is kind of just working through what's happening with them, but also sometimes people now realize that this is something they need to work on in therapy. So it kind of sets an opening, but you need to kind of bring it back together for them so that they can actually go out in society and not feel too vulnerable. You know what I mean?
Yes. Well, I would like to commend you on doing this kind of work, because it requires that you are present with people who are going through different stages of suffering and opening up and releasing and all of this. And just the fact that you are present with people like that is an expression of great compassion. So it's a labor of love to take care of people that way. And I'm curious.
I have to cleanse myself after I cleanse somebody.
I was going to ask along those lines, how you take care of yourself in doing this.
Doing that, I was getting very, very sick. And so that kind of, these types of shamanic type rituals and practices where you're kind of taking negativity from somebody, you have to really go in protected, but you also have to have rituals to clear it after. And I also receive treatments by people too, but you've got to actually do the work as well. You know? Yeah.
Right. Well, I'm curious about another aspect of the results. And that is, do you see things that can only be attributed purely to magic, to synchronicity when you do these kinds of things? You do these kinds of rituals and healing ceremonies for people, and then things change in ways that cannot be connected in a clear cause and effect kind of way. In other words, some magic happens, some synchronicity, meaningful coincidence happens around the person's life or their family, or you know what I'm talking about. So can you tell us a few examples of these kind of things? Because you're working in a magical dimension. So how do you see the magic working?
You know, if you want to look at it from a science perspective, I mean, we're working in the quantum field, really, you know, and there's so much science now about the quantum field and how our thoughts can change our reality. And I really believe that for many, many centuries, these indigenous healers had access to the quantum field just through their innate knowledge and from wisdom that was passed down. But right now, science is actually proving all of that. And so I believe that we're actually working in people's quantum field, and that we are changing their perception by bringing awareness, and their perception of their reality can also affect and change their body too. So that's what I believe they think, that we think of as what we might think of as magic. You know, there's a lot of things that we used to think are very new age and magic that are all being proven by science now. For example, epigenetics, you know, we used to always see that in practice, that people inherit these experiences that their family had, but now there's science to prove that. So it's magical, it's mystical, it's lyrical, it's creative, but I believe that all of this will be proven by science someday too. And hopefully it won't take the beauty of it away.
Science will prove that life is magical.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, I would like to tell people how they can find you and follow you and learn more about your work. So you can learn more about Dr. Gabrielle Francis and her work at her website, which is theurbanalchemist.com. And I'm going to spell that for you because it's not urban like city, it's urban like herbal. And that is the urban, HERBAN, theurbanalchemist.com. So, Dr. Francis, what will people find when they come to see you online?
Well, they're going to find how I really incorporate ancient wisdom to help heal people's modern indulgences. And the indulgences can be from, you know, excesses or the traumas of society, but I believe that all of our modern day ailments can be made better by the wisdom from many, many traditions and countries and people all around the world. And my goal is to bring awareness to it, bring it into people's life, to create ritual for people. But also my hope is to preserve it in these cultures, because in these cultures, it's actually dying out very rapidly. And I don't want us to just take and exploit remedies from around the world without understanding the culture that it's from.
Right. Well, those are very good things to consider, not just in terms of an introduction to who you are, but also for closing thoughts, the importance of the work that you are doing. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of everybody who has been attending this session for a lovely presentation, beautiful talk, and from me personally for the work that you are doing, preserving these traditions, bringing them out and helping people in this very spiritually powerful, but also very demanding kind of way clinically. So thank you for a beautiful presentation.
Thank you. It's so nice to be with you. Bye-bye.
And thank you to everybody for joining us, and join us again for another segment of the Plant Medicine Summit.
Thank you for joining us for the Plant Medicine Summit, brought to you by the ShiftNetwork. To learn more about our programs and events, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for gathering with us and for sharing this empowering path with your friends and family.